Ladies and gentlemen, now please join me in welcoming on stage our moderator, CNBC TV 18's Amit Kumar. And with a huge round of applause, let's start welcoming our stellar panel as well. This, of course, will be a conversation which will be the frontier of AI innovation and policy. With a huge round of applause, join me in welcoming Amit Das, founder and CEO, Think360.AI. Rishi Seth, Senior Director, GTM Products, Growth and Strategic Initiatives, APAC India, GCC's Fractal Analytics. Parminder Singh Kakria, Vice President, Government Affairs and Policy, India and ASEAN at Hindru. Rakesh Doshi, Chief Business and Product Officer, Protean eGov Technologies. Bala Subramaniam G, VPN, Head of the Government Business Unit Center of Data for Public Good at IASC. And lastly, completing the panel, we also have Manoj Kumar Singh, Director General, Digital Infra Providers Association. Let's have a huge round of applause as we welcome our stellar panel on stage. I think we can welcome them with a louder round of applause. Welcome, gentlemen. Amit, the floor is all yours.
I'll just begin with a small anecdote. Last night, my parents were flying in from Mumbai to Delhi, and they asked me, "Beta, kal kya kar rahe ho? What are you doing tomorrow?" So I told them I'm going for a DPI Summit, which we're hosting. And to their mind, they had difficulty visualizing what DPI essentially is. And it's only after I conveyed to them that they booked their tickets using an Aadhaar, which is stored in a DigiLocker. When they reached the airport, they had Digi Yatra. Then they bought a coffee using UPI. I had to go pick them up at the airport, and there they have, at Terminal 3 in Delhi, they have the FASTag, which allows for your car to exit with just a smooth transition. You don't have to take the wallet out and pay money. And it's only then that it dawned upon my parents, as I'm sure it does on a lot of our folk back at home, that this is, we're looking at a stellar journey, a journey which is unprecedented, which sets new benchmarks, and which only gives further direction and confidence as we move towards greater deployment, and which of course brings us to the theme of the conversation today, which is integration of AI. I think AI is front and center for all conversations regarding technology, regarding where we're headed from here. So let me just begin this panel. We have a long panel as well. Mr. Doshi, I'll come to you first. Tell us, from a government standpoint, from your work, tell us, what is it that the government will have to do, that the government will have to prepare itself with when it's looking towards deploying, governing an AI-integrated DPI?
So very interesting. The entire DPI rails, which has been created to serve the citizens, that's the service model which has been created. And this couldn't have been created without the initiatives from the government. As these rails, guardrails that have been created, and we at Protean have been serving for the last 3 decades in building these rails. Very synonymous to being invisible, but very important elements that we have built in, basis which today, a very simple thing, while we are not visible, but any bank statement journeys, account opening journeys, etc., that you see, you will interface with the systems that we have built. Today, nearly 60% of India's population would have got the PAN cards through the systems that we have developed, without knowing that the entire distribution verification elements have been brought in by us. Now, all of these has been actually built through the government initiatives. As these integrated systems and the silos of the various systems and the mandates that each government and each ministry therefore has very different, the elements of AI coming in picture would be an important element where all these data sets, from a silo to an inference perspective, how do they get built? Now, these will be the critical elements and the roles that the government, ministries, regulators will play a very strong role, which will enable all the use cases that you talked about further to build something which makes us very simple, and it brings the entire elements, both from the government and also from the enterprise side, back to the journeys that the citizens has, right from the life to the death. So that's the play that the government would have in building these blocks.
You've given me the cue to my next question. Mr. Gautaman, let me come to you. How do you envision, you talked about data sets. I want to get a sense, how do you envision IUDX of the future? Is it going to be a ready, available source of data where not just private enterprises but municipal corporations can look to develop solutions on an inference-based solution that's a plug-and-play model?
Thank you for that. So we started with this concept of IUDX, which is quite famous now, when the Smart City mission started way back in 2019. And we brought in data sets from across cities, onto a platform called the India Urban Data Exchange. Every sort of data set, right from the traffic signal data set, the IoT sensors, the weather stations data, the pollution monitoring data, the parking data, every other data set that you can actually imagine in a city to make the city more livable. So the major issue that anybody here would have come across is the quality of the data sets, right? So what we've done is kind of standardized for every protocol, right? If it is for a IoT-based data, we've standardized it for example, if it has a PMI, the pollution reading, we standardized so that, if it is from any vendor, be it Philips, be it anybody else, there's a standard. So you actually share the data in whichever format you have in your OEM, and it gets standardized and then actually, put onto the platform in a way that it is understandable to the common man. So, but making data available on a common platform is one of the major challenges, because getting actual real data from out of the vaults of the government is one of the major challenges. But then, yes, we've done it and, proven. We've moved away from urban, and, I'll talk more about it when it comes. So we've been working on various other sectors across India. Yep. Thank you.
Let me take that across to Mr. Seth. Mr. Seth, again, you operate from the lens, you have quite a bird's eye view as to how a lot of other markets are also doing. Help us with some insight from your perspective as to how the other countries are looking at DPI, what are the models that they are developing, how are they looking at integration of AI? Are there best practices? Are there learnings for India to incorporate AI into DPI?
Hi all, very good evening. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to be part of this powerful panel. Coming to your question, right, how other countries are looking at it, I would say a lot of countries are actually looking at how India is going to go about the integration of AI into DPI, because a lot of different countries actually are looking at India's DPI foundation and trying to replicate it within themselves, especially a lot of African countries, a lot of countries in Middle East. They are actually trying to use the same building blocks of identity, transactions, finance, and then trying to replicate it. Some of the organization, or rather some of the companies, they are more looking to make it a bit more centralized. Whereas I think from an India perspective, we are looking at a combination of a central layer, but then at a private level, how can you decentralize the specific use cases, right? How can you decentralize the verticals? And I think this is some interesting discussions that we are seeing in a lot of different countries, that, okay, it's not just about centralized, centrally driving AI, but how can they also now look at this very specific use case, if it is more from a finance perspective or an education perspective, health perspective, how can there can be some private entities who can take that mandate, who can look at those use case and then try to decentralize it, at least for a particular vertical. And those are the learnings a lot of countries, I would say, are trying to take from India. Because, see, when you look at AI and the AI efficiency in itself, usually there are three pillars which organizations or countries are trying to solve for, right? And AI will become more efficient, and the simple formula for that is C into D into a model, where C stands for compute, D is for data sets, and then the models are the usual AI algorithms. Now, how we are looking at it and the discussion that we are doing with different organizations or countries is that how can AI play a role in each of this layer? To give a very simple example, and I would say India is pretty unique because of the diversity of data sets that we have, the different regional languages. And I'll give you an example. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about Jugalbandi. It's an WhatsApp app, collaboration between Bhashini and Microsoft, which is predominantly useful for a lot of farmers to get information, insights in terms of the weather and crop, right? Now, a simple, whenever a farmer, in specific villages, when a farmer used to get a positive response from Jugalbandi app, they used to thank them, not like a English thank you, but Juk Juk Jio Mera Beta. They used to type such information in the app. They used to send good morning, good night, good evening kind of a messages because they felt they are interacting with someone. Now what it does to the data sets, you have to leverage then AI to ensure that you are taking care of refining this data set so it can be further trained upon. That's one example. Similarly, when you're looking at a compute layer, right, we all talk about LLMs, but LLMs are more again for the generic, I would say, usage. Then you have to ensure where a specific SLM can be used, a small language model which can be very verticalized, and it can work at the remotest places where people not have the best mobile devices, but cheap mobile devices, where they don't have a very strong, maybe 4G or 5G connectivity, right? It's important that you have those SLMs very specific to that vertical and region, and it becomes useful. And similarly, also, not just LLMs and SLMs, but LRMs, the large reasoning models, where it's not about just having a conversation, but as we saw in the first session from Shaileshji, it's about agentic AI, giving some reasoning, having some to and fro conversation. So I think these are the learnings which a lot of other countries are also trying to take from India, because purely the diverse nature of data and the different situations that we have, different countries are also trying to see, okay, how we can take the best practices out of it, so that it's not just a centralized focus and push, but they can make it very specific and also reach the last mile.
Speaking of ensuring that connectivity, Mr. Kakri, I want to get a sense from all the prerequisites that we're looking at, how critical is it? I'm just requesting you to borrow from your conversations with the government. How critical is it to also upskill at a government level to actually cope up with this technology?
Thank you. Thanks for this panel. And I represent an organization called Kyndryl. I'm not sure, a lot of people have heard about this organization. We were part of IBM till about 4 years back, and we spun off. So we're the technology services part of IBM. We spun off in 2021, and we are a $15 billion organization listed in New York Stock Exchange, and we run mission critical environments. So by mission critical environments, we mean banking and financial services, airports. We run the Bangalore International Airport, the Noida International Airport. We work with a lot of manufacturing systems and public sector as well. So we run TaxNet 2.0. We recently been empaneled with Government of India to provide AI services, to build AI services. One of the 6 who got empaneled. So I think with that background, thanks for the opportunity. I think, I think the core theme of the panel today is to look at, we already have DPIs who are providing services, and how is that bridge to intelligent DPI? How is that going to work? I think it's a systems transformation, but it's also a people transformation. So what we're looking at in terms of DPIs being more intelligent, I think one is we're looking at, right now, there are a lot of data being captured by DPIs. So if I look at the case of right now weather, there's a lot of data that is being captured by weather, how much it's going to rain, what is the temperature. But that's more, the system is generating responses. But I think the next level of intelligent DPIs is, the system is going to predict, saying, look, if the weather is heading this way, it may not be a great time to crop paddy. I mean, if you look at right now, lakhs of hectares, right now is getting ready for paddy cultivation. But if you look at the weather pattern, right, it's not very suitable. So, and the system is going to predict, and the system is also going to say, look, at a certain time, or for instance, grids, right now we've got a peak electricity consumption. The system is going to predict what is going to be the electricity consumption in a particular state, in a particular district, and hence put together a problem statement rather than just, some IoT systems generating data. I think that's one. So I think to the question that you said is, what's the people transformation? I think as we look at this transformation, it's going to be a lot about people transformation as well. So at the first level, we got to democratize AI learning. I think across systems, we got to enable users to have some sort of AI literacy. It could be somebody, at a state level, at a district level, a welfare officer. He or she is using the system, and he or she is trained to use the system to look at, how to use this dashboard. And then if the dashboard is generating data which is not helping, if there is a gap, then the user can go back and say, look, these are the new use cases, and hence these are the outputs that I want. Second piece that I want to look at DPIs is cross-functional teams. I think moving forward, just specialization in one particular activity is not going to be sufficient. If you look at DPIs, we had architects, we had technologists, we had database administrators, we had operations people in the same team. We run something called a readiness survey. We have the readiness report. And I would encourage everybody, go to kindle.com, readiness report 2025, we did it 2020. We do this every year. So one of the key things that came out was, from a people perspective, if you look at cross-functional teams, it's going to be much more effective rather than having people work in silos. I think that's the second part. And the third part is, we've got to embed training into workflows. People are not going to be, going into trainings and then come back and say, look, now I'm trained on a particular AI use case. It's got to be embedded in workflows. So moving forward, a grievance redressal system. How decisions are made on the grievance redressal system right now, they are being made, but it's more about how AI is going to be used to come to a particular decision, and how different users of that system, they are trained to take decisions using AI. Thank you.
Mr. Das, let me borrow from that in terms of, these are some interesting roadmaps that we need to follow. From your conversations, you're of course a part of the Maharashtra task force as well. Tell us, what are some of these governance issues that you're contending with as a part of that task force?
It's always fun to be talking about them, right? First of all, thank you for having me here. I think one of the interesting things that I learned as part of the task force is that it almost starts at the top with the political will. Do I want to drive a certain amount of change? Do I want to bring AI as a headline, or do I want to implement it at the grassroots level? So our first set of conversations actually went down to the level of saying, can I do it at the Gram Panchayat level? And then somebody, like me walks in and starts being the naysayer and saying, do we have the kind of infrastructure and readiness to do it at that level, right? So if you think about the kind of initiatives you want, the kind of capabilities you need to bring, and what will it take to make it happen? So this is going back to some of the points just made about what does that cross-functional team look like? Who will drive that change, right? Can the state, for example, invest in very localized infrastructure, which then creates local communities? So for example, and these are very weird examples that just stay with me for a second. A state might be generating something like, not generating, but let's say through the college system, about 5 lakh, 10 lakh engineers through a few districts. Now, when we talk about AI engineers, quote unquote, you are talking about a set of base skills that they have through their education, but you want a B set of base skills, which is an absolute transformation from what their college was teaching. Because by the time they came out of the system, the world has changed. As a practitioner, my world changes every 3 months today, probably every week, if it is the case. So do I want to change the education curriculum a little bit? Do I want to create public-private partnership around what modules to teach? What public-facing modules? For example, there's an initiative called Aaple Sarkar in Maharashtra, right? Through which we drive a lot of these small tech pieces on the portal itself. But the downstream, the on-field implementation of some of those initiatives would look like, let's digitize a department. Let's take 5 sponsored districts and absolutely turn them into data machines, if you can. Okay, I have the data now flowing in. Do I have the compute infrastructure on top of it? Do I have the right vernacular infrastructure on top of it? From inferencing, feedback loop perspective. And that takes me to a very interesting problem, which is discussed so far in many different ways, called trust and accountability. So one of the things that is easy to laugh off when you're engaging with ChatGPT is that this dude is hallucinating, right? Thoda sa galat jawab deta hai. Imagine the state versus citizenry interactions. Do you think you have the option of making a mistake in a response? You don't. Now, this tech beast called tester, which at one point in the technology company evolution used to be a low-paying job. Developers were paid more, testers were paid less. Now think about the AI universe. Suddenly you will find the need to have very qualified testers, the people who generate the feedback loop data, right? For that, you need domain expertise, tech expertise, you need analytics, AI, data, everything in one mythical beast. Where will I find these people? Are there enough of them who can help me train these public goods model, if you will? So all of these are constraints around which you learn to work when you're part of the task force, and you start trying to figure out what the small, medium, large size initiatives need to look like, because to get capital allocation at that grander scale, you need to have a grand vision. But that grand vision needs to be broken down into 50 different sequential initiatives where you make small changes. We talked about the sachet side education at school level. Today, a 12-year, 15-year-old, 13-year-old can build fantastic applications in a school, in a small district, or in a village, because they can interact vernacular with an app, which has, let's say, a Claude plus L1 Labs or Sarvam or Bhashini kind of overlaid on top of it, right? When you see the voice notes example, add a little bit of complexity to it, and suddenly you have people in India not speaking one language, but we speak hybrid languages. Batata ka bhav kya hai? Kanda kitne rupees mein milega? Right? Now you understand when a Tamil speaking person is talking about it, and a Tamilian in Chennai is different from a Tamilian in Coimbatore or some other place, because their context also starts to play. So India is fantastic that ways, that we are 100 countries in one country. So that means we are 100 models in one country. There are 100 outposts, 100 inferences. So that's the nature of the discussion we have. So education, agri, industry, the money flow across all of this, those are the kind of ideas that we often talk about.
That's an interesting anecdote you gave us in terms of the vernacular differences that we have. At the AI Summit that Delhi hosted very recently, there was an interesting comment that was made, that was that the Hindi word acha could mean multiple things. It could mean that I'm good. It could also mean a question, acha. It could also be an exclamation. So these are aspects, challenges that I guess we'll have to contend with. But Mr. Singh, let me come to you in terms of taking AI at scale across to everyone. That is where your role comes in terms of digital public infrastructure. Tell us, in terms of connectivity, in terms of reach, do we need to double down? Because there are still vast pockets which either maybe don't have a phone. If they have a phone, maybe they don't have the internet connectivity on it. Or do we have to now work around it, leapfrog this, using some of these tech-enabled solutions?
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very good question. And first of all, thank you to CNBC TV 18 for having me here. And before I exactly answer your question, let me put myself why I'm here. So basically, I'm slightly different than the kind of digital public infrastructure being discussed up till now. I represent the world's largest digital public infrastructure, which is physical in nature, which is called telecom towers and other on which the radios hang. And why I said we become the world's largest, because India has shown that how, if the backbone is strong, on that the virtual highways can run. I recall my days in 2008 when India was the country who was taught in Harvard for the sharing concept of digital infrastructure. Since then, India is leading how fastest and how most technological advanced digital infrastructure can be ahead of the curve before the actual use cases come. This actually comes back to your question. It is not the problem that we have not ubiquitous coverage. It is, most of the panelists have discussed and elaborated the need of the use cases. Unless or until there is a use case, these monetizable use cases are must to have the ubiquitous coverage. Let me tell you one data point. I don't know whether if you can guess which state in the country is having the highest data uses. Can you guess? The state which Mr. Nishad was there. It is Uttar Pradesh. And it contributes roughly 16% of the total use cases. But think it of in a different direction. How many monetizable use cases are there? These data uses are for what? Seeing reels, seeing videos, playing video games, etc., etc. So unless there is a monetizable use case, this ubiquitous coverage will not make any sense. We talk of 5G, 4G to 5G to 6G. What is the difference between 4G, 5G, 6G? 4G was having 10 millisecond of latency. 5G is having 1 millisecond of latency. Now we all talk, including government talk, that we are moving ahead world first 6G. 6G has a 1 microsecond of latency. Where is the use case? The same state which is having the highest data uses, does it have any single use case of 6G? Then we say, no, ubiquitous coverage is not there. So ubiquitous coverage will definitely be there provided there is a use case. So this is what is very important. So I don't find there is any gap, but the foremost importance of today's requirement is innovation of the use cases for public goods. If you really look, before I close this discussion of ubiquitous coverage, we all have been hearing since few hours that use cases of enterprise level provided by the government. We all have heard that whether UPI is sustainable, whether Aadhaar card providing is sustainable. Day before yesterday, we were hearing that we are going to have some transaction charges on the UPI because banks are finding it too much difficult to sustain. These are not the use cases to have ubiquitous coverage of 5G. Already is facing the challenge, and this challenge is going to multiply when the 6G is there. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
It's interesting. Speaking of use cases, Mr. Doshi, let me come to you. A lot of conversation with respect to AI integrating with DPI talks about how there has to be a cross-section interface, so to speak, between different sectors. So take, for example, health and finance needs to be brought together. Tell us, in your experience, any such cross-sections that excite you, that perhaps give you hope for opportunity in terms of scale?
Very interesting question. Actually, if you look at multi-sectoral, wherever DPI, which is the essential services bringing to citizens in a digital way, healthcare excites, agriculture excites, education excites, financial inclusion excites, and there are many more use cases that will keep building as we go into the depth of leveraging the technology. The inclusivity that AI brings in with an intelligence layer built on top of DPI is wonderful to look at. Look at an agri use case. A farmer who gets loan basis the environmental conditions, basis the produce that they have, on basis of what? Basis the consent that the farmer gives of the farmland, of their farmer ID, and the yield of the crop. It goes to the fertilizers, so the other industry also gets connected to it. Look at the healthcare environments that comes along with it. Given if there is a pandemic in an environment, these data sets come very handy. And across this, as healthcare brings in the multitude aspect of doctors giving advice from multiple different regions. We have built actually some of these use cases across our assisted distribution platform as well, which brings the elements of identity services business integrated with some of these essential services. So very interesting use cases. There are also challenges along with it. In the last question that you asked in terms of the support, a strong support that government and ministries could provide to leverage this cross-sectional data is very, very important. Each of these ministries have very different mandates, and their mandates are restricted to certain conditions, and of course, legitimate use cases are built. So if the inference out of these data sets could be created in an intelligent manner and fed back into the systems over which this DPI rails come in, can create exciting opportunities for us to serve the country in a very, very differentiated manner. And what comes back to citizens both from the governance and enterprises, and therefore the public-private partnerships, has an immense potential.
That's in fact my cue for my very next question to you, sir. When you talk of public-private partnerships, that's, as Mr. Doshi was pointing out, holds immense potential. It's yielded a lot of results for us as well. Is that the model to bet on, or are there other models that excite you, forms of partnership that can help take this journey forward?
I would definitely vouch for the PPP model because, you know, when we were doing this IUDX across cities in India, we've worked with many private players, big, small, the startups. Sure. Say, for example, we've actually implemented a use case of route optimization of solid waste trucks in Varanasi, right? And Hitachi came in, put in the money on the table and said, you know, I'm going to showpiece this as, you know, the result was a straightforward 30% reduction in the, you know, route optimization, wherein economically also the state actually found out that, yes, I have a reduction of 30%, right? So there are many players like that. We worked with NEC in Kalyan Dombivli and worked on the environmental sensors and shown what credibility it brings onto the table. And small players like Safety Pin, for example, it's a startup. And we brought in multiple data sets like street lights, camera in a street, and you know, they built an application on top of it to say how safe a particular street in Pune is or in Chennai is for elderly to move across or women to take that road, right? So any day the PPP is really good as long as we've been hearing about trust. So the trust in the system and trust to ensure that the data is safe, secure. Thank you.
We've talked about a lot of prerequisites, what's required, what from a governance standpoint, from a technology standpoint. Mr. Sheth, let me ask you for a roadmap in terms of if there was to be a rollout of integration, what would that look like to your mind?
So I think what DPI today has done is ensured that there is access enabled for everyone, right, with the current layers and building blocks. So that access is pretty much taken care of. And on top of it, by adding the conversational layer, ensuring that we are taking care of all the 22 languages and regional dialects, that access is further enhanced. So that's, I would say, the foundation is built. What will be next is that this access, how can you now take it to equal distribution? That was being referred by I think, Mr. Sahil also, that the future is right here, but it's not just equally distributed. So how can you ensure that there is equal distribution of this access? And what it means is that not just enabling the access, but from the current push mechanism, how can you also move towards a pull, or rather from the current pull mechanism, how can you move towards a push mechanism? And what I mean by that is that currently any kind of benefit, any kind of, I would say, direct payment, right? Someone who is eligible needs to ask for it. But can we move into a scenario where you need not ask for it? The moment someone is eligible, you have enough authentication, you have the consent in place, and those benefits can actually be provided, right? Be it to a farmer, be it to a mother who is eligible for some amount at the time of a childbirth. Maybe that individual, that mother is not even aware that there is certain benefits which she can prevail. But there will be a proactive push and inform that there is a certain amount which that mother can actually avail, but obviously before that you need to take the consent. But that awareness, how can it be enabled? So the push mechanism, and this is just one part of it, right? Just try to extrapolate, and this is where the AI and intelligence layer is coming into picture, where you are trying to identify who is eligible for which benefit and then pushing it. But then also try to position it in the finance scenario to a micro lending. Now everyone, and again I think earlier this point was discussed, that a lot of EMIs are monthly based. A lot of credit which is issued is basis the recurring income that you receive at the end of a month. But then there are so many vendors who potentially earn on a day-to-day basis. All the UPI data of their transaction, their incomes is actually available. Now, can this data be actually provided to the micro lenders, and basis that they can really identify and issue on a need basis a particular micro lending, right? Which will actually empower, I would say, a lot of people, again, within India who today don't have access, because obviously the systems are designed not that. So again, this is an example of push mechanism that it's not just when someone is demanding it, but you are trying to identify when someone needs it and then pushing it. Similarly, now in the time of when there is a particular drought or particular situation where your crop potentially can be disturbed, right? Again, because of all the AI and the information which is being captured, you can identify which are the areas which potentially will be impacted. Can there will be a push mechanism of insurance? Can there will be, if it's certain pesticides which can ensure that they will avoid certain kind of a situation or damage to the crop? Sure. Can there be a push mechanism again to that particular farmer? And not just that, because you also have ONDC. You not just guide that a farmer needs to use a particular pesticide, but try to ensure that you also identify that which is the latest and the closest store available where the farmer can potentially purchase that pesticide. And when they are purchasing that pesticide, if they don't have the funding, again, go back to the micro credit lending. So how this is a holistic use case. It's not just information. You have to look at which are the scenarios and how can you actually ensure that all this digital public infrastructure is being used for the larger good for which it is intended.
Sure. Mr. Kakri, I want to get a sense. Very often we talk about how technology, the pace of it, outstrips the pace of regulation. We've seen that previously as well in previous technology cycles. We're seeing this now as well. The question I want to ask is, as Mr. Das was referring to earlier, that very often if a chat GPT hallucinates, we just laugh it off saying that, incorrect data. But the trust that the Indian public has reposed in the DPI means that there is no opportunity for laughing it off. Now, at a time when we're looking at AI deployment, how does regulation keep pace? How does a government official deal with that challenge?
Thank you. I think very important question, and this is especially in the context of DPI moving to intelligent infrastructure. I think what we're looking at moving forward is all the DPIs. Right now, all of us, we have all the users, essentially, they have a standard interface. What we are going to soon moving into is very personalized interfaces. So depending on usage, depending on the persona, depending on the context, all the DPIs would be personalized. What we're also looking at is moving forward, DPIs will start augmenting decision making. What essentially it means is they're going to look at the data of, let's say, a personal user, and they would say, look, by the way, you are doing so-and-so transactions. This is most likely a recommendation from our side. So a lot of DPIs will also start getting into decision augmentation. Now, if you look at the pace of technology, it's always going to outpace regulation. So the question is not that we should slow it down so that the regulation catches up. What you mentioned, very important, is till now we were looking at systems. Now we're looking at data. Now we're looking at outputs of the systems. And hence, we got to look at governance which can very optimally and very continuously go along with the way system is evolving, rather than it being a standalone, once in a quarter, once in a year activity. So there needs to be continuous monitoring. Why? Because accuracy is very important. Along with accuracy, security of the systems is very important. In case there are instances of data leakage. Now, how do you find data leakage is happening? How do you find that prompt injection is happening when you're continuously monitoring the system on the go? And these are very, very important outputs. For instance, right now, if a department deploys a chatbot, and there is a prompt injection, and the chatbot starts giving out wrong feedback to the users, I mean, it's going to not just limit the impact to that particular DPI. The risk is going to travel to the ecosystem. So I think one is governance has to move from like a periodic, reactive governance to a very active, continuous monitoring. I think that's one. Second is, let's go back to look at, when we were developing DPIs, we had regulatory sandboxes. We had the live environments, but we had very practical sandboxes. And what the sandboxes did was it enabled DPIs to look at how would a DPI behave if it were to go live in a live environment. What would the constraints it would face? What would the new scenarios it would face? I think the similar regulatory, we had, RBI come up with sandboxes. Similarly, for each one of the domains, we need to develop sandboxes in order for regulation to actually deliver its intended objective. And I think that, so the reality is, it is not effective that the system, how well you are regulating the systems. I think the regulation has to move forward. It has to be governance on the go. It has to be continuous monitoring. And given the complexity at which the DPIs would be operating, I think the regulation, it has to be very adaptive. It has to be, the governance has to be very dynamic.
Mr. Das, same question to you. Regulation, trying to keep pace with the technology.
It's a difficult one because it goes back to the foundational question of what do you want the regulator to do? Their job is not to throttle innovation. Neither is their job to kind of say, go all out, do whatever you feel like. In almost all sectors, the regulator's job is to protect the end customer, the larger mass of people that they are supposed to serve. And the regulations, hence, are broadly designed as guardrails or directive instructions. Now, a few weeks back, there was this conversation around mythos. I can broadly tell you, because of all the work we do in BFSI, that it sent a ripple of fear across the ecosystem, right? Because, for good reasons, with good intent, the regulator said, I want to understand what your cybersecurity policies are like. I want to understand, have you guys gone through mythos? I want to understand if you know how to deal with it. What kind of vulnerability assessments have you guys done? They called for meetings where people from all the banks, etc., were called. Now, it's all a good intentioned conversation, but it sends, when a regulator sneezes, the industry catches fear, cold. So we have to be, the regulators always have to be careful about when they are trying to be very specific versus when they are trying to issue directional guidance, so to speak. And in the current times, in the AI frameworks that we are talking about, no regulator can afford to be, instantly reactive while they're expected to be instantly reactive. Meaning, Claude Fable was announced yesterday or 2 days back, I think. I think everyone expects you to, very clearly, black and white, tell them, am I supposed to use it or not? This is not a vulnerability patch we are pushing across the system. Ki aapke Java XYZ version, but there is a vulnerability that has been found. This is about driving adoption of innovation, which is happening at a very crazy pace right now. And so the regulators, I feel for them in trying to keep pace with everything. I don't think there is a three-part responsibility here. As we often debate it in the industry circles. Clarity from regulator is always desirable and expected. Within the clarity provided by the regulator, all industry participants are supposed to apply a lot of pressure through innovation. A lot of the lending product innovation, banking product innovations that we talked about would not have happened if somebody was not ready to push the boundaries a little bit. We would still be in the 10-year-old model of lending, branch pe koi jata hai, koi field mein jata hai, and so on and so forth. But somebody pushed the boundaries. That's why we had video-enabled lending onboarding. Somebody will add an intelligent layer of it, so it will be unassisted. But almost across all of this, there will be guardrails, right? So somebody has to push the innovation. The third bucket, interestingly, in the AI era, will be the customer. Because what you want to, while building sovereign models and these capabilities, you also have to respect the sovereignty of the individual. The absolute control, ownership, and power over their own data is one of the foundational principles here. Which means transparency, which means the customer's right to come back to you and ask you more questions, and you responding at the speed of light, which will create more confusion maybe. So there are three parties who are constantly at loggerheads with each other. I want the fastest service, but I don't want fraud. I want you to give me UPI which operates like I press the button and things happen. But if something goes wrong, I want you to be accountable. And if you don't do that in the next 5 minutes, I want regulator to step in. And regulator will say, okay, innovation band kar dein kya? So it's a constant tussle. The speed at which we are learning, the speed at which we have to evolve, that puts an immense amount of pressure on everyone involved. But in the interest of 140 crores plus people that we have, I would expect that the regulators will continue to do what they have done, which is issue guidelines, draw guardrails, so that innovation does not go out of hand.
Mr. Singh, we're running out of time, so I'll come to you for a quick final comment. In terms of, at a functional level, what will it take for executing this? We're looking at large commitments towards data center capacity here in the country. We're looking at a very large build out. Is that what's going to make it work? Or will it be perhaps AI on the edge that will make this work?
So good question, and it is always very debatable whether a large scale data center will work or an edge data center will work. So I would put it up in a way that both are not competing to each other, both are complementing to each other. And from the perspective as well, when we are actually finding it is not a cyber threat, but a physical threat on the infrastructure, and the recent Iran war has shown us that what kind of challenges we can face if the centralized large-scale data centers are being hit. So that learning gives us that edge data centers could be a lifeline at that time when a crisis occurs. And also from the energy guzzling point of view, not all data required to travel to the centralized database. There are many requirements which are localized in nature, which require local transmission of data, and only handshake once in a day or once in a periodic time. So in my mind, edge data center would be essential, not only complementing, and without edge data center, this large scale data center will definitely function, but it will be most inefficient way to operate. That is what my submission is.
We're completely out of time. I'll just come to each of our panelists for one quick thought, one recommendation, one suggestion that you would leave with the government for taking this journey forward, beginning with you, Mr. Doshi.
It's a very purposeful work that all of us together are doing, including us, government regulators. The thought process to serve the country, the citizens, is a big responsibility. That responsibility can be served well with these technology layers kept in mind and built together and solving for problems. And we've been doing this with various initiatives that we have shown. We're building registries for the country at the largest scale, using AI to do deduplication of more than 500 crore records across these registries, to actually bringing on the table with an assisted model. Today, see, our country demographics are such that it requires assisted model to function. Not everybody, there's a digital divide still, which continues. Not everybody like us sitting in the room, जो अपने phone से सब कुछ कर लेंगे. They will need that assistance, and that assistance will continue to come in a broader and stronger way with AI and DPI layers coming together.
Mr. Sheth, your word of advice?
I think DPI has laid a very strong foundation. I always feel that what if there was also something called enterprise DPI, right, which will ensure that the kind of foundation and the building blocks that we are providing to every individual, if same or similar can be extended to an enterprise level. There are a lot of functions for an enterprise, for an entity, which might reap same or similar benefits. So I think that will be something interesting area to focus and invest upon.
Mr. Das?
A simpler one. I think similar to what we have done with UPI, the government, national and state levels, they just need to build the rails. So UPI, AI infrastructure investments, compute, data centers, etc., and bring down the cost of failure for innovators, if you can. Because I don't think we should burden the state with everything. कि आप ही इंफ्रा डालो, आप ही ट्रेन करो, आप ही मार्केट में लेके जाओ, जब प्रूव हो जाएगा तो उसके बाद हम आके पैसे कमाएं. No, there will be private capital available, but I think just laying down the foundational structure is very, very similar to UPI. If you could just get that democratized at scale, I will be, I'm expecting the kind of innovation that the world has not seen.
Mr. Singh.
Simple. We are from the business of sharing. So till the time sharing was limited to within the sector, now it is a time to expand the sharing beyond the sector into intersectoral. We have been approaching municipal corporations and other to offer our infrastructure for uses beyond telecom. And this is also the PMO drive, that single tower multiple use. So increase sharing. And it is actually going back to our old concept of what we call is Sanjha Chulha. यहीं से हम शुरू हुए थे, तो किचन एक ही हो, डिशेस मल्टीपल हो जाए तो बेटर रहेगा. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड सिग्निफिकेंट केस इज CCTVs. हमारे पे आइए, आपकी स्पीड 3x हो जाएगी, कॉस्ट 1/3 हो जाएगी, एंड वी विल हैव मच मोर फास्टर स्पीड फॉर एनी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टू रोल आउट. द आंसर इज sharing.
Mr. Kakria.
So I think if you look at DPI, three things stand out: trust, inclusion, and open structure, open architecture. Trust, we didn't left it to assumption, oh, we'll build DPI and it'll be trusted. No. We made sure that wherever DPI is there, we intentionally built trust into it. And that's how population, that's how systems, that's how government, that's how different stakeholders, they started adopting it and they started owning it. So I think first is trust, very important as we now adopt AI. Second is inclusivity. We deliberately made DPI to be inclusive. There are certain sections of the society that have to be included in the technology journey. Now, as we moving to the next phase, inclusiveness becomes very, very critical. Otherwise, the bias will take over the system could take over to different places. Third is openness. Very important that the next phase doesn't become closed. We had a very open structure to DPI development. We had startups play a lot of role in DPIs. We had a lot of role of academia doing research with DPI. I think as we now adopt AI, openness becomes very, very critical so that different parts of economy, different parts of society, they can be benefited. Thank you.
And final word, Mr. Gautaman.
Yeah, I would actually take the thread from where he left. In very simple terms, just open up the vaults, make the data available, integratable, and interoperable. That's when you can have stronger DPIs, stronger AI, and whatnot. Just open up the vaults. Don't just keep it in lock and key. Make it accessible.
Well, this has been a fruitful discussion and perhaps a look into the crystal ball as to what the future may look like with DPI. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights. Mr. Singh, Mr. Kakria, Mr. Gautaman, Mr. Doshi, Mr. Sheth, and Mr. Das. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I think we can have a louder round of applause as we thank this stellar panel for what was a very, very riveting conversation.